Black Death, how the plague changed Europe forever. In the early 14th century, Europe was a world balanced on fragile foundations. Society was rigidly structured, religion ruled daily life, medicine was based on superstition, and most people believed the world operated according to divine will rather than natural laws. Life was hard, but predictable. People expected famine, war, and hardship, but nothing could have prepared them for what came next. Between 1347 and 1351, Europe faced the greatest catastrophe it had ever known. The Black Death did not merely kill millions, it reshaped civilization itself. When the plague finally loosened its grip, Europe emerged as a fundamentally different continent, economically, socially, culturally, and psychologically. This was not just a disease. It was a revolution born from death. The world before the plague. Before the Black Death, Europe was overwhelmingly rural. Nearly 90% of the population lived as peasants under the feudal system, tied to the land owned by nobles. Wealth and power were concentrated in the hands of kings, lords, and the church. Most people were born into a life they would never escape. Cities were growing, but they were overcrowded, filthy, and dangerous. Sewage flowed openly through the streets. Rats thrived. Clean water was rare. Medical knowledge was primitive, based on ancient texts and religious beliefs rather than science. Disease was common, but nothing on the scale of the Black Death had ever struck Europe before. How the Black Death reached Europe. The plague likely originated in Central Asia, where it circulated among rodent populations for centuries. As global trade expanded through the Silk Road, merchants unknowingly carried the disease westward. By the mid-1340s, the plague reached the Crimean Peninsula, where Mongol armies reportedly catapulted infected bodies over city walls during sieges, one of the earliest examples of biological warfare. In 1347, merchant ships arrived in Sicily carrying a horrifying cargo, sailors either dead or dying, their bodies covered in dark swellings. Within weeks, the disease spread across Italy, France, Spain, and beyond. Trade routes became highways of death. A disease beyond understanding. The Black Death took multiple forms. Bubonic plague, marked by swollen lymph nodes buboes. Pneumonic plague, which infects the lungs and spreads through coughing. Septicemic plague, which poisoned the bloodstream and killed within hours. Victims experienced fever, delirium, vomiting, and unbearable pain. The infamous black patches on the skin, caused by internal bleeding, gave the plague its name. Death was swift and merciless. In some cities, half the population died within months. Doctors were helpless. They wore beaked masks filled with herbs, believing bad air caused disease. Treatments included bloodletting, astrology, prayer, and superstition. Nothing worked. Fear, panic, and social collapse. As the plague spread, order collapsed. People abandoned families. Parents fled their children. Friends refused to help one another. In many places, the dead lay unburied because no one dared touch them. Entire villages vanished from maps. Chroniclers described scenes of unimaginable horror. Houses sealed with the dead still inside. Fires were lit to cleanse the air, bells ringing non-stop, until there was no one left to ring them. Normal laws ceased to matter. Some people turned to extreme religious devotion. Others gave up entirely, indulging in pleasure, believing tomorrow might never come. Europe had entered a world ruled by death. Religion under fire. The Catholic Church had long claimed to be humanity's protector and mediator with God. But when priests died alongside peasants, when prayers failed, and holy rituals proved powerless, faith began to crack. Some believed the plague was God's punishment, leading to the rise of extremist religious groups like the Flagellants, who whipped themselves publicly to atone for humanity's sins. Others lost faith altogether. Worse still, Fear demanded scapegoats. Jewish communities were accused of poisoning wells or spreading disease deliberately. Pogroms erupted across Europe. Thousands were murdered or expelled. The Church survived the Black Death, but it never fully recovered its unquestioned authority. This erosion of trust would later fuel movements like the Protestant Reformation. The death of feudalism. The plague did something no peasant rebellion ever could. It broke feudalism. With up to half the population dead, Europe faced an unprecedented labor shortage. Fields went unplanted. Workshops closed. Lords suddenly needed workers, and workers knew it. Survivors demanded higher wages, better conditions, freedom to move where work was available. Governments attempted to restore the old order by freezing wages and forcing peasants back to the land. These laws failed spectacularly. For the first time, ordinary people had leverage. Over time, this shift weakened noble power, expanded the middle class, encouraged urban growth, laid the foundations for capitalism. The Black Death transformed Europe's economy more effectively than any war or revolution. Women, opportunity, and change. The demographic collapse also changed the role of women. With so many men dead, women entered professions previously closed to them, running businesses, managing property, and working as artisans. While many gains were temporary, the idea that women could function independently in society had taken root. Gender roles were no longer as rigid as before. Medicine and public health are reborn. The failure of medieval medicine forced Europe to confront a painful truth. Tradition and faith alone could not protect humanity. Cities began experimenting with public health measures, quarantines, isolation of ships and travelers, health officials to monitor outbreaks. The very concept of quarantine was invented during the plague. Though true germ theory was centuries away, the Black Death pushed Europe toward empirical observation, a critical step toward modern science. Conclusion: death that changed the world. The Black Death was not just a tragedy, it was a turning point. It destroyed old systems, empowered ordinary people, weakened unchecked authority, transformed culture, and reshaped Europe's future. Out of devastation came transformation. History proves a harsh truth. Sometimes, the world only changes when it is forced to. Europe survived, but it was never the same again. If you found this deep dive into history fascinating, subscribe for more in-depth stories, and comment below with the next historical event you want us to explore.